What kind of a show are you guys putting on here today?
You're not interested in art?
No.
Now look, we're going to do this thing. We're going to have a conversation.
From Chicago, this is Filmspotting. I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar.
What are you going to do?
Full disclosure to the whole world.
That truth will upend all established order across the entire world. If you do this, there's no undoing it.
With Disclosure Day, Steven Spielberg returns to a career-long fascination. Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
We've got a review, plus catching up with the Sheep Detectives, Massacre Theatre, and more ahead on Filmspotting. Welcome to Filmspotting. Josh, last week we finally caught up with the movie story of the year, Curry Barker's Obsession, the low-budget horror hit. This week, I finally saw a very different kind of word-of-mouth success, much sweeter, The Sheep Detectives.
Was that a double feature for you? Obsession, then right to Sheep Detectives?
It maybe should have been, but no,
yeah.
there was a little bit of time between the two. I will share a few thoughts on the Sheep Detective. Spoilers, it's just as much sweet fun as everyone has been saying that it is. And then we'll have some not so sweet fun. We call it Massacre Theatre, where we perform some really terrible acting. That's later in the show. A reminder, Filmspotting is available as a video podcast. You can watch us at youtube.com/filmspotting. Up first, Disclosure Day.
Steven Spielberg has directed more than 30 feature films, Adam, many of which we've grown up on, a good number that we've discussed in great detail here on the show. Even so, Disclosure Day, his latest, helped me clarify something about his work. Steven Spielberg helps us believe. Watching his movies, we believe that an archaeology professor could moonlight as a Nazi fighting treasure hunter. We believe that dinosaurs could once again walk the earth. We believe that the wealthy owner of a prominent newspaper would do the right thing. We believe that aliens are real and that one of them, yes, could be your best friend. Written by David Koepp from a Spielberg story idea, Disclosure Day finds the director back in alien territory where questions of religious belief have always flitted around the edges and are made pretty explicit here. Josh O'Connor stars as Daniel, a cyber security expert at a shadowy American agency who has turned whistleblower after discovering the true nature of the secrets he's been protecting. On the run from his former employers, he falls in with Emily Blunt's Margaret, a TV meteorologist who's been having strange out-of-body experiences. What follows is a paranoid thriller with exciting set pieces, a nice streak of humor, and all sorts of questions and ideas about humanity's place in the universe. Adam, I was able to see Disclosure Day early, and I've already tipped my hand on last week's show. I found it to be exciting, thought-provoking, and honestly kind of beautiful. How about you? Did Disclosure Day move you to believe in anything? Or maybe did it possibly weaken your faith in Spielberg and his work?
Well, I definitely wouldn't go that far. I want to honor the experience I had in the theater and how I felt walking out. I clearly saw discipleship in my future, Josh. I thought I would be joining you. I would be here proselytizing without a doubt. And there were a few reasons for that. The subject matter itself, I'm drawn to. The suspense structure of it. This is largely a chase movie and it's pretty intense. And I like how Spielberg and David Koepp withhold and reveal information. I love how we're just thrown right into the action and we have to figure out who these characters are while they also have to figure out who they are. And I really like Emily Blunt's performance.
She's so good.
And I don't just mean appreciating it on a technical level, which I do, but genuinely enjoying watching her playing this character. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. Also, we'll talk more about this, seeing it truly as a spiritual sequel to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I do. That is the aspect I'm maybe most excited to discuss. But I do have to admit that the more time I suppose I've spent wandering in the desert outside the church of the cinema, the more I've begun to doubt. And
oh no,
I think I'm going to go back to a key line from the movie from Elizabeth Marvel's character, Sister Mara. She has this key moment where she's speaking to another character, Eve Hewson's Jane, and she says that she didn't lose her faith in God. She lost her faith in people, I think is what she says. I wonder if one's response to Disclosure Day, you'll have to tell me, I wonder if one's response to the movie is directly proportional to how much faith they still have in people and their current level of cynicism. Because while I so admire Spielberg's faith in humanity, or what I perceive his faith in humanity to be after seeing this movie, and his faith in cinema as a tool to urge humanity forward, that's just not where I'm at in 2026. And it's not where his movie gets me. The magic of movies is when all of the elements combine, not to manipulate or to trick, but to genuinely push past your jaded defenses and make you believe. Without getting into the details at this point, Spielberg didn't convince me. He didn't convince me that this moment that the movie builds to would be this grand unifying moment. Didn't convince me that perhaps humanity is even capable of such unification. And you asked, what does he want to make us believe? I think he wants to make us believe that empathy is powerful enough to cure humanity's ills, and that humanity can perhaps be cured, that humanity can be unified. And it simply takes a unifying event, a transcendent event. I couldn't get there with this movie, and I also couldn't separate, I'll say, the moment itself from its mechanics. My skepticism was something that had been growing in response to other choices that had been made leading up to this point. So I did leave the movie feeling some exhilaration, and that's valid for the reasons I said, and I want to get into more, but doubt has crept in, Josh.
Yeah. I understand a lot of that. And, personally, I consider myself quite cynical and definitely suspicious of movies that want to try to manipulate you towards something that you don't feel is true. I think the distinction as you're talking, why I didn't have that experience with Disclosure Day, is a different understanding I had of where the movie ends, which we won't spoil, but I can talk generally the way you did. I saw it as ending a step further back from, it sounds like, where you saw it, where I don't know that the movie dramatizes the way empathy and the like saves humanity. I think it brings us to the precipice, but stops short of whether or not that works. And I hadn't been thinking about this, but as you described your experience, that might be why I did respond so strongly to it. I think if I had felt the same way you did, that it had pushed towards this utopian future, that might have been a step too far for me. And I think what this movie instead is arguing not to give up on that future, rather than showing us that it happened. There's something, a trick Spielberg pulls is that, and he does this in his more historical or even political movies, is he's able to recognize and honor our cynicism. I think this is something possibly he's moved more towards in his career, whereas earlier films, some of them might have not wanted even really to wrestle with that element, the cynicism and the skepticism. And here with Disclosure Day, I found that it honors that, but lobbies for our right to believe in something beyond that. and to believe in the hope we have that there's something beyond it. It nudges us. So Disclosure Day for me nudges us toward possibility. That's what I felt coming out of it. And I think, if as the two of us feel in 2026, especially in the United States, that's laughable. I left the theater kind of once again ready to believe that maybe not. Precisely though for me, because he didn't show us how it happened, because it stopped short of that. But yeah, I think, those are bigger, larger thematic, emotional reasons why I resonated with the movie that I'm just discovering. But even in the moment and even afterwards, this is Spielberg, to your point about this being a car chase, a chase scene. Car chase is part of it. It's just so exhilarating to see him working in this vein again. And I know maybe something like Ready Player One tried to, but not successfully at all. And here you just see that command and mastery of a suspense sequence on display. And that took me through a lot of this. The streak of humor I mentioned, I was glad there was some of that to lighten and soften the heavier elements that this movie is exploring, and totally with you on Blunt. I don't know if she's co-lead or lead or how you would describe her part. We meet her later in the film, but my feelings for Josh O'Connor as an actor. He's fine here, and in a bit, it's how they're written, how these roles are written.
Agree. Yes.
But my goodness, is this her movie? She is funny, hilarious. There's a screwball element to the early moments when her character is not understanding why she's able to suddenly speak different languages. She handles that with a lot of humor. And then also when she's asked to later bear the emotional burden of her personal experience and as a stand-in for humanity's experience, I think she's able to do that well and pull that off. And to your point about the technicality of it, yeah, just jumping between languages and you just see like the immense talent
and
Emily
emotion
Blunt has.
too. Yeah.
And emotion as well.
Yeah.
There's a scene maybe we can break down, and her performance is a part of this, and so is Spielberg's master as a filmmaker. Maybe we'll get to it later, or we can jump into it now. But that sequence in the train car after a car chase has ended and she and Josh O'Connor are recovering from surviving it, I think what she brings there is just incredible. That might be the scene of the movie for me in a weird way, and I haven't fully processed why yet, because it doesn't plot-wise necessarily have all that much, obviously, to do with even some of the ideas at play. But I think it's just a standout Spielberg sequence, and she's a big part of it.
Yeah, she is. I think it may tie together some larger Spielberg ideas and tropes perhaps too that maybe we can talk about. I agree, or I understand what you're saying in that at the end of the film, he wants more than anything, rather than to suggest that everything's been figured out and we can all just hold hands and here's the clear path. He wants to get our attention more than anything. I'm not going to say what the last word of the movie is, even though I may be correct in saying that it's in the trailer, so I'm probably not spoiling anything. But I haven't seen the entire full trailer, so I won't say it, except to note that there's a final word that suggests he really wants to get our attention. And there may be other interpretations of why he chose to begin the movie this way that are much smarter and more aligned with his actual intentions than what I'm going to say. But I do also love the beginning of this movie, which doesn't just throw us right into literal action of a wrestling match, but it's a camera getting punched and kicked, the point of view of the camera. They're at a wrestling match. This exchange is happening between the O'Connor character Kellner and the guys in black who represent the corporation Wardex, who want to keep these secrets from getting out. And as I think about it, especially as a bookend with the very end of the movie, I think about it almost as like a literal kick in the face, like saying, wake up, Absolutely. That's what the point of this is. For me, I suppose, Josh, there was still that word you used. There's still such fervent earnest hope that I want so badly to believe, but that the movie didn't. I'm cynical, but the movie also just didn't convince me of because of how it's actually portrayed. That it felt like a bridge too far, and I think that there is though a unification that it depicts, that precipice that you mentioned that it shows, that even seemed, because of those mechanics, seemed, I suppose, too far-fetched for me. That's where I just couldn't I couldn't get past it there at the very
Can I ask a quick question about that? Is it related, because you said mechanics, is it related to the fact that much of this world-shaking news is spread through broadcast television?
It's part of it. It's only
I kept
part of
thinking
it
about
though.
that too.
Yeah, it's part of it. It's how, though, within broadcast television, the decisions are made, what they're sharing, how they're sharing it. But more than that, Josh, it's the reaction to it. It's the reaction to it and my belief in how people would respond to it in the year 2026.
I agree with you there. I agree with you there because it's, and I do think that is a flaw here because if he wants to address our right to truth and how that, once we have truth, leads us to make choices about what we believe, then this movie does not address, and I think this is probably what you're thinking of, this movie does not address that such revelations would immediately be discredited, manipulated.
Yes.
This is a movie that
used for more dissension. Yes.
Used for more. Exactly. It is a bit naive on that element, I will concede.
That was my struggle. Now, I want to say about Blunt, to pick up where you were going. And unfortunately, it is, I'm going to say something negative, I suppose, to get at that positive. I love Josh O'Connor too, and I think generally here, as a character and in terms of his performance, I do think he's largely wasted. I think that Spielberg maybe knew that he would cast him someday from the first time he ever saw him on screen, because tell me what you think of my interpretation here. If you could take Elliot from E.T., just take his face. So I don't mean Henry Thomas now, but I mean Elliot from E.T. And if you Google it, Josh, I'm telling you, you will see it. And with the ears, the haircut, everything, that innocent face, and you age it a bit, but only a bit, because Josh O'Connor has that boyish face still, right? You get Elliot's face on a man's body. It's like he was meant to be in a Spielberg alien movie and encapsulate that wide-eyed wonder that we know that Spielberg wants to express. But there aren't any scenes or moments that make particular use of his skills, and he's just not a very dynamic character. And for people that have seen the film, they'll know that he and Blunt's character Margaret are of a pair, and they both have a certain set of skills. And of the two, we never see really his skills get employed. We see her skills get employed throughout the entire film, and her skills are way more interesting and dynamic. And look, I always thought Blunt was a good actress. And that's why I kept asking myself throughout the movie and after, Josh, like, why is this performance, why does this feel like such a revelation? And why does there also seem to be so much buzz about it? And I think part of it is the range. Margaret is a character she's the character in the film who is the most deeply affected emotionally, and she provokes the strongest emotional reactions in others. Yeah. But she's also the character, you said this, she generates the most humor. There's that screwball element to her character, right? So she's so funny, but she's the deepest emotionally. And I think there's another way to frame it, though, that gets us back to Spielberg and his work. Blunt's Margaret doesn't just experience the overwhelming wonder we associate with so many Spielberg characters. She embodies it. She's in a constant state of discovery and awe. That's the screwball element. I think ultimately it's not just humor. It's that she's being inundated. It's coming from within, but she's taking in so many signals and then expressing those signals and learning so much about herself and the world around her. Watching a performer portray that so deftly is really thrilling. And I'll say this, it's actually moving.
Good morning, Kansas City. Let's take a look at today. Let's today. is today's.
There were multiple scenes in this movie that weren't even necessarily, Josh, the big emotional moments. Watching Margaret come to terms with her identity and purpose because of Blunt's performance, watching how she expressed those breakthroughs, those actually moved me in my seat watching it more than maybe the Spielberg big message moments in the film did.
Yeah, and I think they're of a piece. I think they're definitely meant to be the godlight moments down on them, and she gets some of those. But I think you're right. She brings the same sort of visceral one-on-one experience of what Margaret is going through to every single moment in the film. I mean, honestly, the when you're talking about it, like this almost could have just been her movie, right? We could have just sort of experienced all this through her perspective, not, and I know you're not saying this, not that O'Connor is bad. I do think, to go back to the boxcar sequence, he's quite good and able to bring some of his own gifts there with just to spend a little bit more time on it. This is after, and I love how this begins. There's a few Spielberg little like Easter eggs, right? It begins with the two of them in a car and they're being chased and they come to a railroad crossing. So we're right there with Close Encounters. I was like, oh yeah, like let's see what's going to happen here. And it ends up where, I won't spoil all the details, but basically at the end of the sequence, which I found to be pretty thrilling, even if it's relying on CGI and other trickery to a degree, they've survived. They are hiding in this boxcar, and the choice to have the boxcar holding all these pianos being delivered. But they're tipped on their side. And so what that means is all the vibrations are making the piano chords kind of hum, and everything is discordant. It's perfectly capturing their experience having just survived this. And Margaret, is like having a full-on breakdown at this point, shaking hands. And I love not only how Spielberg sets the context for it, but brings us intensely close to her. Daniel comes behind her. The blocking here is just so moving, where he's almost enveloping her, trying to hold her still, grabs one of her hands and just places it on some of those shaking piano chords that are open to just give her something to concentrate on until she can regain her balance, her composure. And you said maybe there's more going on here in terms of the themes, but even as I'm talking, I'm just realizing that it's sort of what Disclosure Day did for me. In this tumult, in this that we're living in right now, is he gave her something to at least hold on to in this moment. Daniel did, by placing her hand there, and it works. And it's just this lovely little interlude that you gave probably 50 other directors, this idea of this movie, and you would never get a scene like this.
That's it.
Or it'd be the scene that would be cut,
And that's why it's really effective. And it's really effective because of the moment that they share, and because we have a character who just did something that, let's be honest, is something that an action star like Indiana Jones typically does in a movie, but she acts like a normal human being would act in the aftermath of it. She is completely freaked out. And I really did appreciate that. I'll speak to where I was going with that idea about Spielberg and his career. The Easter eggs you mentioned. Close Encounters, that homage at the railroad crossing, very clearly, right? But even the train then crashing into a car in that way is clearly a Fableman's callback. And the train crash on the screen that really launched him and inspired him to become a director as a kid. The way they get into the train, Josh, to get into that train car is like the beginning of The Last Crusade. When River Phoenix comes down through the hatch there. Can we even look to, these are things I was thinking about because he does draw your attention to moments like this. Can we even think that perhaps the casting of Wyatt Russell in this movie as Emily Blunt's boyfriend was deliberate as sort of an homage to the Sugarland Express and casting his mother, Goldie Hawn, in that movie?
Possibly.
Maybe not. But the choice to use those piano strings and the vibration there when we know famously, especially from The Fabelmans, that his mother played the piano. And he's always seen those two sides, or portrayed those two sides, the math, the science side, the more rational side that his father embodied. And we have that in Kellner here, and we have the empathy side, the heart side that his mother, that he sees in his mother, and she was the piano player. And so the piano strings there seem like a very intentional choice. And as much as I liked that scene, I also have to admit that I suppose I did find some of these Easter eggs a little, when I add them all up, I found them a little clunky. Like, it was Spielberg at this point in his career saying, I'm now trying to make a non-autobiographical Fabelmans, where I'm trying to culminate these elements and weave my preoccupations and my themes all into this movie. And what I really appreciate more is the unconscious Spielberg, when these things are finding his way into his work, versus what seems to be more like conscious choices.
Yeah, that didn't bother me because they didn't feel oppressive or like sore thumbs, even though, and I hesitate to mention this because it did bother you, but the fact that the motel they crash in is the Indiana motel.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, brings them back to Indiana.
Sure.
So, I kind of got a slight chuckle about that. But as you're talking about it, Adam, I feel like this is a bit of a piece to Scorsese's The Irishman, in a sense that revisiting the one genre that a master filmmaker is most associated with. And I think I've got to give more thought to this. I think coming away with not entirely different ideas or propositions, but slightly different ones. I mean, Close Encounters definitely adds on a note of optimism, and we have that here. We talked about when we did The Irishman, the distinctions between something like that and what a life in crime in this way, where that leaves you at the end of your life. Not entirely different from something like Goodfellas, right? Yet hits its own notes, to stick with the piano idea. Is this Spielberg's The Irishman? I don't know. I have to give that some more thought. I think it might be.
Yeah,
I think it might be that good, actually.
Okay. I wouldn't have put it in those terms. Do you have more? Because I can respond to that.
No, because it just struck me now. So I don't immediately have more. So go on.
I wouldn't have put it in those terms, but I think that analogy may apply to where I wanted to go in comparing this to Close Encounters. I said I thought it was a spiritual sequel. And I think the age and the time gap really matters here, because I don't think it's just him returning to the alien genre, if you will, which he's made other movies, obviously, that have incorporated that idea, or aliens as plot. In our Movie Deathmatch podcast we recently posted, I think it was Jen Chaney, and it was just an aside, but I liked the aside, who said she'd love to see a version of Close Encounters from the Terry Garr's character, her point of view. And I recognize that she's not suggesting an alternate version of the movie where the mother, not the father, is the main character. That's not the point.
Right.
It's seeing the movie through that character's eyes. But I'll throw this out before I get to my main point. Disclosure Day, it's probably going to be the closest we'll ever get to a version of Close Encounters where a woman has the encounter and is compelled by some force drawing her across the country, even if it means destroying her domestic life. So I think that's interesting just on that level. Yep. But what's more compelling is looking at Spielberg, his trajectory as a character. I'm going to put character here in sort of single quotes, from Close Encounters to Disclosure Day. And what I didn't realize until my 2017 viewing of Close Encounters, and what I wrote about in my Letterboxd review, was how we can implicitly see Roy Neary as a stand-in for Spielberg himself, the obsessed artist, someone who's been blessed/cursed with a vision, who will stop at nothing to realize that vision, even if that means compromising his personal relationships. Well, then we all saw The Fabelmans, and we realized that was explicitly so. That's clearly what Spielberg has been thinking about and making movies about. And who does he cast as the great truth seeker in that movie? The ringleader who can put all the right people and equipment together to harness the light and sound and reveal the higher truth. A master director. He cast Francois Truffaut as the director of the sequence at the end of the movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So Margaret Fairchild isn't the analog to Spielberg that Roy Neary is. I think we have here, Josh, a new Spielberg figure.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have a new Truffaut figure, and they're the same.
Yeah.
It's Coleman Domingo's Hugo, who spends the entire movie doing what?
Yeah, he's constructing a set. Yeah.
He's overseeing the construction of a set so he can do what? Direct a scene between actors. And along the way, I'm going to put it in these terms. Along the way, what does he do? He's constantly taking phone calls from his principals, from his actors, and having to address their motivation, questions about their motivation, and keeping them in the right headspace to get them to perform the scene, and creating the right environment, the right physical and emotional space to get the performance, the transcendent, truthful performance that he needs from them. Hugo / Spielberg, is the all-knowing, now he's the all-knowing, benevolent artist who's there to share his message of empathy and goodwill with the world. And Josh, what seals it for me is that Domingo, to me, even seems to be channeling Spielberg in his demeanor, in his warmth, in his sensitivity, anytime you've ever seen an interview with Spielberg, his unflappability on set, right? He's never deterred by anything, never panics. Domingo never panics once in this movie, no matter what anyone throws at him. And the other thing is I started paying attention to his costuming, because obviously it's a movie. The costuming is going to be very intentional. But I was thinking, why is he always wearing like these jackets with the vest and the buttoned up shirts, or he's always wearing these certain kinds of outfits. And so then I Google Spielberg and all the images that come up, Josh, he's wearing the same things. He's even wearing the Wikipedia image of Spielberg is a vest outfit where he's wearing the same fall colors that Domingo's wearing at the end of this movie. So I'm going to argue that I think somewhat similar perhaps to what you were saying about the Goodfellas to the Irishman, I think we see from Close Encounters to Disclosure Day a transition from the more impetuous, self-destructive artist who needs a guide in an older master. He's now the older master who's here to guide us all to a better place, a place of healing.
Yeah. I like that. It sounds like you like the movie even more. So
there you go. I like what it makes me think about.
You're talking yourself into it.
Yes.
And the Scorsese Irishman comparison, of course comes to mind because this is something I wanted to ask you about. The dissertation I'm writing right now is on both of them, Scorsese and Spielberg. So they're both knocking around in my head. And in terms of Spielberg, it's directly related to the fact that these religious allusions in Disclosure Day are no longer illusions like they were in Close Encounters, or, I think War of the Worlds, based on its source material, had a nod to like a church or something here or there. It's all over this movie, to the point that I was initially kind of mad because, the part on Spielberg I'm writing is going to argue that his movies have offered, through this theory of re-enchantment, religious experience that may be unintentional, but it's there for certain viewers. Then I'm sitting in Disclosure Day, and we have this character of Jane, who is Daniel's girlfriend, who says
text.
At one point she ran away. It's text. She ran away to be a nun, and she starts she pulls out a crucifix in a scene. She starts having calls with the nun you mentioned about what does this all mean if you believe in God, and suddenly people are told they're aliens. Aren't they going to lose their faith? So part of me is like, oh wow, this is like great. Like this is going to help me with my point. And then it just kept going and going. And I thought, this is terrible. There's nothing left to write about. The question I have for you And I think it'll work. I think it'll be really interesting. I'm not in a panic anymore. But the question I have for you is whether or not that adds something to this experience, this notion of a religious reading of Spielberg's work and the wonder and the enchantment and all that, or if you thought it was made too explicit. Because I'm of two minds in that I like it for my project. I like it because to an extent, I share some of those ideas and questions and concerns. I think it is handled fairly well in the movie. But if I had my choice, just as a moviegoer, not a dissertation writer, if I had my choice, I'd rather that it was left under the surface.
Yeah.
And we were able to tease it out. But where did you fall in the fact that, like, there's a scene with Jane holding a crucifix in her hand until it causes her to bleed and have essentially stigmata? I mean, that's about as explicit as you're going to get.
Right. And the contradiction I'll give you is that I think I'm with you, that I wish the religious element was more subtextual than text. And yet that scene overall, I think, is my favorite scene in the movie.
It really works, doesn't it?
That entire sequence, that conversation between her, and I know that's just one part of it, but that sequence between Eve Hewson's Jane and Colin Firth's bad guy Noah, and the way he's infiltrating her mind, and the entire way that's constructed with their eyes changing color to depict when they've been dove on, because it's called diving, right? That may be the single most, for me, effective, at least suspense or thrilling sequence in the film. And so it actually may have worked, Josh, even as literal as that seems, with it digging into her as stigmata, if there hadn't been so much conversation around it. If we hadn't known that she was, all the details about her actually being, maybe if we had just heard a little bit about her experience as a novitiate, as opposed to everything that we get. Some allusions to it might have then allowed us to read and do more interpretation, as opposed to it being such a literal aspect. And then you add on to it the fact that Jane, I understand that the movie needs her to come back in later, but then she kind of just disappears as a character for a decent chunk of this movie. That's
unfortunate.
I'll say one of the other, I know this isn't answering your question, but one of the other struggles I had with the script here is that, or I suppose the execution, is that I never bought Kellner and Jane as a couple. And I'm not sure why that is, because I like Hewson and obviously O'Connor both as performers, but there was really nothing about their chemistry together, the way they interact and engage with each other. The line she says at one point, she said, "We've had sex," and she's saying that for a different reason. But if she didn't say it, I don't think I would have had any clue that they had ever been intimate with each other, because they don't act at any point like two people in a serious relationship, and that's actually important to the story.
Yeah. It's true. They don't have any time together as a couple. We meet her, as you said, it's a strength that the movie starts in the midst of action, but that's when we meet her too. So not only are they established as a couple, but they're already a couple who are relating to each other in the emergency of this scene. So none of that groundwork has been laid. So yeah, that's probably a weakness. Going back to the sequence, with when Colin Firth is diving and kind of they're swapping bodies. This is like the religious stuff that I think works better. That's clearly a stand-in for like possession or like an exorcism. And so that, letting that kind of be in the background in our thoughts, I think works best. But it leads me to the second part of that whole sequence where Daniel comes to rescue her, drives away. And I love the touch of like, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? He's like, it makes it a little more believable that he's getting away with all this stuff, that he's just acting on pure instinct, making dumb decisions and miraculously getting away with them. But she's in the back car and at this point switching in and out of her, consciousness
state,
and is a threat. And, this has been done in how many horror movies, but I love the quick shot of her reflection in the knife she's holding, her face. And I only bring that up not because it's like that genius, but there is just incredible reflection work going on in this movie. This is back to Spielberg and the attention to craft and how you give him a scene and he's going to find the most interesting way to show it to you. And it comes from, I think there's an early scene, and I can't wait to see this again to look for stuff like this, where Daniel is driving a car and it's a windshield reflection scene, which we get all the time. And there are more lights and images and things going on there than your standard shot like that. I don't know what it all is, but to me, it just suggested, like, this is early in the movie, all the possibilities as this movie starts that are laying ahead of us, that were being shown. You mentioned Hugo, the Coleman Domingo character. Love the introduction of him where we're in the headquarters of this war doc, like the brain trust, the war room, millions of screens all over, glass offices, and they're talking about him, and a glass door closes as they're talking about him, and what is revealed in the screen is a reflection of Hugo on the giant monitor.
Yep.
I mean, just come on. Like,
I know.
To
so many examples like that.
So many examples of just pristine, inventive filmmaking.
And yet, there are so many of those. And then there are sequences like this. And this is where you're probably going to think, I was hoping you were going to say this, considering how much you loved the movie, so then it wouldn't be me and just putting my nitpicking hat on. But he's one of our all-time great action sequencers. And that farmhouse set piece begins in such an unintentionally comical way, where we have to watch Daniel, who is this not just a brilliant mathematician. There's a suggestion based on what we learn about his gift. He might be Earth's greatest mathematician, yet he's clearly a terrible strategizer. In the motel sequence, we learn this. And we also learn this when he decides to try to rescue Jane from the farmhouse. And he somehow sneaks up on 2 or 3 dozen men in black while running along an open fence.
The crouching in the fence. Yeah.
Crouching along the fence. And there are moments like that, Josh, throughout this film, even at the motel sequence too, that just start to wear and start to mount my skepticism about the credibility of some of the choices that are being made that did, I think, end up leading to me not being as convinced by some of the end choices, unfortunately.
I mean, the only one that stood out to me, to be honest with you, is the crouching along the fence. Like,
so bad.
One crouch would have been all right. When it kept going on, I was like, okay, come on. But yeah, I don't think it's a recurring issue with the movie at all. You could probably cite more examples, but there are a few more.
But let me give you one big one. One other big one that I'm still not clear on what the expectation was in terms of what they wanted the audience to take away from it, and it's the running thread that we're on the brink of World War III. Because we learn this, it's introduced sort of casually, and it actually doesn't really seem to be hanging over everything, other than one scene where people are kind of raiding a convenience store, a gas station along the way. But I think it's meant to add stakes to the question of whether or not people will care about the disclosure that we're building up to, whether or not they'll be so distracted by it or not. And I think also whether or not something like this event, what's supposed to be this unifying event, could have the power, I think, to potentially stop the conflict and bring people together. But throughout the movie, Josh, it is really treated mostly like an afterthought. It barely even feels like a backdrop here. It either needed to not be an element at all, or it needed to be woven through the movie in a much more significant way for me.
I was okay with it as context, and I think if it didn't sort of feel like we're at that point right now in some ways, it would have bothered me more. It would have seemed like it was thrown in willy-nilly, but because that's how it feels to be alive right now, to me, it brought a bit of immediacy that it didn't bother me in the way it bothered you, I guess I'd say.
Any final thoughts you need to get out about Disclosure Day, or have we disclosed?
I think we've disclosed. I think it's one, even though I've seen like 10 days ago, I'm clearly still processing. And I think there's a lot of other rich stuff probably to get from it. But right now, when we do our top 5 of the year so far, I'm pretty sure it'll be on my list at least. So maybe I'll bring some of that to the fore at that point.
All right. Disclosure Day, currently out in wide release. We would love to hear your thoughts about the movie. Email us, feedback@filmspotting.net. Let's take a moment, Josh, to thank a Family Plus member, Cassidy Gonzalez in Seattle, and family member UWE, according to our Filmspotting pronunciation guide, which could be wrong. We're going with Uwe in Munich, Germany. Josh, tell us how Cassidy in... Yeah, go ahead.
I can confirm.
Oh, because you met Uwe.
I met Uwe. Yeah, he probably wrote in and shared some of this information before we met at the Berlin meetup.
There you go.
I think that was in February. But yeah, Uwe and Cassidy, thank you both very much. How did they find us? Cassidy shared this. I can't remember when I first started listening, but I know I became a more regular listener when I made a career change back in late 2018 and found myself looking to fill 10-hour days with discussions and topics I was passionate about. An early episode that hooked me was episode 718, Best of the 2000s, Madness Round 1, which kept me coming back through the rest of the tournament. As for Uwe, he said, I found you via iTunes in the summer of 2005 when I was looking for something to distract me from my physics summer school. I did not really know what a podcast was, who did in 2005, but I knew I liked what you did. Not sure which episode I listened to first, but I got hooked quickly and checked out the 10 or so old episodes in the archive while I was waiting for new episodes. The show has been a constant companion in my life ever since. For all you've given me over the years, I should have donated or joined the family much earlier. What finally pushed me towards subscribing was a notification on Blue Sky that said Larson on Film is following you. I have no idea why Josh did that because I rarely post anything original there. And if I do, it's about bike infrastructure in Munich. But now I have no choice, right? Time to pay the dealer. I have a whole list of people I follow on bike infrastructure on Blue Sky. It's great.
You're also writing a master's thesis about that.
There you go.
As I understand it. Uwe, you need to track down Magnus from Berlin for Sam and me, one of our first dedicated listeners ever, not to mention our first international listener ever. And we haven't heard from Magnus since circa 2007. We don't know where you've gone, Magnus.
Yeah, sadly, Magnus not at the Berlin meetup, so can't help you.
Okay. Reviews we got wrong. Cassidy, very diplomatically, says, I want to say that Adam's 2.5-star rating for The Life Aquatic was one he got wrong. But after listening to the bonus episode where you all discussed your thoughts on a rewatch, I can't argue with the critiques given. However, in my heart of hearts, I still know you're wrong and will one day come around to the magic stew of sadness meets hilarity that only grows in esteem with each subsequent rewatch. I'm glad to hear Sam came around at least. That was our 4th bonus episode ever back in May 2020. I wish I love that movie as much as you do, Josh. Uwe
the magic stew.
Yeah, Interstellar. For Adam, I could not stand the movie for its sloppy combination of quantum physics and the meaning of life. In retrospect, however, it was probably my own fault because I was doing my PhD in quantum physics at the time, and I might have taken things too seriously. Need to watch again. This is a movie we have reviewed twice, back when it came out in 2014, then in 2020 as part of our Nolan Uwe review. That was 785. I do want to point this out because as we are recording this, we are about 30 minutes away from the second movie deathmatch being recorded. And it is Interstellar versus Inception in honor of Nolan's The Odyssey. We have Bilge Ebiri, the great critic from Vulture New York Magazine, representing Inception. And representing, you'll understand why this is relevant, not just Interstellar here, Josh, in a moment. Representing Interstellar is a PhD candidate at the University of Oxford, physicist, who, unlike you, Uwe, thinks Interstellar is the greatest movie ever made about science.
Wow.
So Abigail James, the pop culture scientist on YouTube, cannot wait to hear her defense of Interstellar, a movie I love.
Yeah, that's going to be great. I'm the one who had to, for family members who get our upcoming bonus episode on It Follows, the phrase begrudging respect came up. I'm the one who had to move towards begrudging respect for Interstellar on that bonus episode. Liked it a little bit more on my revisit. How about favorite books about films or filmmaking that are appreciated by Cassidy and Uva? For Cassidy, it's Buster Keaton, A Filmmaker's Life. Not to be confused with Dana Stevens' Buster Keaton book, Cameraman. For Uva, it's Every Man for Himself and God Against All. It's exactly what you would expect from a Werner Herzog autobiography, he says, highly entertaining and full of ecstatic truths.
A really good book. I can recommend. I read it when Herzog was featured at the Refocus Film Festival a couple of years ago and did a Q&A at the Englert. Great book. I think I have it signed by Herzog himself. Very, very happy to have that in my collection.
Thank you, Cassidy and Uva, for being family members. You can follow Cassidy on Letterboxd at Baumer_CG. Uva is at OOVA. Uva. There you go.
I guess that tells us the pronunciation,
answers
doesn't
the
it, Josh?
In addition to keeping us doing what we're doing, membership comes with perks. You can listen early and ad-free. You'll get a weekly newsletter. You'll get exclusive opportunities, including the Filmspotting Family Discord and monthly bonus shows. And yeah, we've got that June bonus show, another We Were Wrong Once edition on David Robert Mitchell's It Follows. That is right around the corner.
Well, there's no we. There's just I was wrong. And I was wrong again. That's what we should call this bonus episode. I was wrong again about It Follows. I'm going to make so many family members mad. But it's coming your way. And we'll title it Rage Bait. How's that for the episode? You can look forward to that for as little as $5 a month, and that's discounted if you pay annually. You can support us, and you can get all the benefits that Josh mentioned, filmspottingfamily.com, and we'd love it if you would rate or review us over on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify.
Wake up! Everybody wake up! We found George on the grass, and he's not moving.
What? Lily, tell us what to do.
Our shepherd was murdered. And we shall solve the crime.
Welcome back to Filmspotting. The big movie stories of the summer are about low-budget horror. First-time feature directors Kane Parsons and Curry Barker have huge hits with Backrooms and Obsession. The family-friendly version of that success is The Sheep Detectives. The live-action CGI sheep movie opened in early May. It's still playing on over 1,000 screens. Hugh Jackman is in the cast alongside Emma Thompson, Molly Gordon. There are sheep voiced by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Patrick Stewart, Bryan Cranston, and others. Yes, everyone seems to love this movie. I have not seen it yet. I'm slow simply because Babe Pig in the City, I mean, I know there can be more than one or two sheep movies in the universe, but are so close to my heart, it's difficult for me to acknowledge that possibility. I've been late on this. Adam, you got to see The Sheep Detectives. What did you think of it, and what's your theory behind why it's been such a hit?
Well, there's nothing like a deadline. I happened to see that it was leaving my local theater. It had one screening left the day before I looked, and I said, this is going to be my last chance. I want to see it. I want to see it in the theater. And I expected, based on the glowing reactions to it, that it would be warm-hearted and entertaining, and it is. I didn't expect, Josh, and this is where I imagine the next two things I'm going to say, this is where I have to imagine it goes to this next level in terms of the enthusiasm for it. I didn't expect that the murder mystery element, it's relatively well crafted. I could be wrong. I haven't asked him, but I kept thinking Rian Johnson probably would be proud of how the characters deconstruct the conventions of the genre. I didn't know who the killer was, and I was pleasantly surprised by how it all played out at the end. Nicholas Braun plays the cop in the movie. People will know him from Succession. His transformation from absolute dolt to decent detective, even with the help that he gets from the sheep, it may be a little too quick, but he's a really fun performer. obviously a really, really skilled comic performer, and he makes this local cop, Tim, someone you are really rooting for throughout the movie.
I just realized, all by myself, that you couldn't have got here today from America, right? Which means you were already in this country last night when George was murdered. I'm not accusing you or anything, but is that right?
The other element besides the murder mystery, I didn't expect it to be Mr. Rogers-esque in its direct but delicate handling of difficult topics for a young audience. Not only does Hugh Jackman's George, their shepherd, die fairly early in the movie, and it's treated as a real loss that the sheep feel, but we as viewers feel it, Josh, and there's another significant death that occurs, and in both cases, the response of the flock is to do exactly what we as humans also want to do, certainly, and try to do sometimes, and sometimes successfully do, and that is to deny, just to try to forget, pretend that it didn't happen, and cast it as far from our minds as possible and try to move on without actually processing the grief. The sheep detective says, no, I give credit to Craig Mazin, the screenwriter here, says, no, these are traumatic experiences. Grief and loss are real. Death is real and will happen to all of us. And there was a dad with kids, one on his lap. So obviously a young kid in front of me. And when the movie started getting into this, I felt a little uncomfortable for him. I was worried on his behalf about the questions that he would have to answer on the way home or at bedtime or possibly any moment in the theater.
Yeah, right.
But Mazin and the director, Kyle Balda, they address the questions so well and on kids' levels that my next thought was, as a parent in that situation, if I was, I'd probably be grateful to the filmmakers, actually, for presenting it and how they handled it for me. They took a load. They did the work for me in a lot of ways. And I can imagine this film having a significant impact subconsciously on a lot of kids and an impact consciously on older kids who may look back someday and recognize this movie as a turning point for them. But I'll also add, none of this is heavy-handed. The movie doesn't come to a stop to make these dramatic, important points. They don't feel underlined. It's all just completely organic to the story, and it's part of the main character's journey, especially the main detective here, Lily, who's voiced by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. So it was, I want to say, a pleasant surprise, even though it's exactly what I expected it to be, I suppose, based on all of the hype around it. It lived up to its hype.
All right. You had me at Mr. Rogers, so I will definitely be catching up with this. And yeah, I think I can still catch it in theaters. It's currently, as of right now, playing in wide release.
I recently had a close encounter with something very unusual. Who are you people?
Our current poll, Josh, is asking our listeners to choose one and only one Spielberg alien movie, Close Encounters versus E.T., the Extraterrestrial. Now, back when this was the movie deathmatch poll, I thought E.T. would run away with it, and it was within 3 or 4%. Guess what? So far here at filmspotting.net, it's within 5%. Are you surprised?
A little bit, yeah. I think, and as we talked about, the age breakdown will probably affect this to some degree, what age you were when you saw these movies. But yeah, I thought maybe E.T. would take a clear win here, but it's still open, so your vote counts. If you want to vote in that poll and leave us a comment, you could do that at filmspotting.net, and we'll have the results and your feedback on next week's show.
Josh, it is almost here. Next weekend.
How you feeling?
I'm almost ready. June 27th and 28th in Chicago, 2Fest, 2 Filmspotting. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet and you're in the area, please do come out and join us. We would love to see you. We'll be at the Athenaeum. We'll be at the Music Box Saturday and Sunday. Great movies. Cleo from 5 to 7, Krisha, Wet Hot American Summer, The Royal Tenenbaums. We've got great guests. We've got Agnes Varda biographer Carrie Rickey, Krisha writer-director Trey Edward Schultz, Wet Hot American Summer star Marguerite Moreau, and friend of the show critic Scott Tobias. And You know him. You love him. Michael Phillips will join us for the Royal Tenenbaums on Sunday. We'd love for you to come out to the Athenaeum on Sunday. Get a fest pass. Join us for all 3 movies. We'll have plenty of time between screenings. Get to hang out a little bit. Get to enjoy some food in the area and see some great movies and hear some, hopefully, insightful conversations. Filmspottingfest.com, Josh, is where you can get all the details.
All right, for now, it's Massacre Theatre time. This is where Adam and I perform a scene, and you get a chance to win a film spotting prize. Last time, we massacred this scene.
Okay, how about this? If I can guess your name in 3 tries, you have to come have a drink with me tonight.
Why not?
Okay. You look like a
That was Catherine Keener and John Cusack in 1999's Being John Malkovich, written by Charlie Kaufman and directed by Spike Jonze. That massacre was part of an episode that included reviews of Backrooms and Exit 8. So why did we pick that scene from Being John Malkovich? We heard from Danielle Lagrip from Burbank. Who could forget the liminal space between the 7th and 8th floors?
Indeed.
Very nice.
Maxwell Fletcher in New York City adds to that. The tie-in for this week's hilarious Massacre Theater is movies featuring liminal spaces directed by dudes making unconventional leaps to the big screen. From YouTube, in the case of Backrooms' Kane Parsons, and music videos for Malkovich's Spike Jonze. Bravo. All right, Josh. Reasonably brimming hat this week. You are going to reach in and pick out this week's winner.
Our winner is Zach Anderson from Tokyo, Japan.
Okay, Zach, the film spotting budget does not allow for me to send a tote bag or t-shirt all the way to Tokyo. The costs are exorbitant, plus all the customs paperwork I have to fill out. But I can offer you a trial membership to the Filmspotting family. Just email feedback@filmspotting.net to claim your prize.
Would that it were so simple.
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 My dear boy, why do you say that? Why do you say twere?
Well, you should say it like I said it.
We move on now to this week's edition of Massacre Theater. No hints are needed, but I had to withhold mentioning this movie during our review of Disclosure Day because I made a specific point about that film, and I was going to point to this film as a movie that does this better. But I didn't say that because I knew we were massacring it. And I'm just going to leave that right there, Josh, as we embark on this scene.
Fair enough.
Okay. Now, you are going to start it off. I'm going to give you the action. Are you ready?
Yes.
And action.
Everything you're doing here, I have to explain to a room full of men whose first and last question is, how can this be used against us?
Kangaroo.
What is that?
In 1770, Captain James Cook's ship ran aground off the coast of Australia, and he led a party into the country, and they met the Aboriginal people. And one of the sailors pointed the animals that hop around and put their babies in their pouch, and he asked what they were. And the Aborigines said, kangaroo. It wasn't until later that they learned that kangaroo means, I don't understand.
I can sell that for now.
Fair.
And remember what happened to the Aborigines. A more advanced race nearly wiped them out.
And scene. No funny voices. You're doing some subtle work there.
I feel like I got him.
I think you came pretty close.
I might have come fairly close.
Fairly close. We'll go with fairly. Yes. If you know what film we just massacred, email the movie's title, your name and location to feedback@filmspotting.net. The deadline is Monday, June 29th. We will select the winner randomly from all the correct entries and announce it in a couple of weeks. Josh, that's our show.
If you want to find Adam and the show on Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, YouTube, or Blue Sky, look for Filmspotting. I'm at those places as Larson on Film. We are independently produced and listener supported. You can support the show by joining the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. You can listen early and ad-free. You'll get monthly bonus episodes, a weekly newsletter, and access to the entire show archive. If you're looking for show t-shirts and other merch, go to filmspotting.net/shop.
Out in limited release, you can see Leviticus, another feature horror debut, this one from Australian director Adam Chiarella. Time and Water, a new documentary from the director of Fire and Love, Sarah Dosa. That's playing at the Gene Siskel Film Center in Chicago. Out Wide, Girls Like Girls, a coming-of-age romance set in rural Oregon. That's from director Haley Kiyoko, adapting her own young adult novel. The two big ones, though, Josh, and two movies that we hope to both get to. We're definitely going to see one of these films. The Death of Robin Hood from writer-director Michael Sarnowski, who made Pig and A Quiet Place Day One. Hugh Jackman stars as an aging, regretful, and fatally injured Robin Hood with Jodie Comer and Bill Skarsgård. And yes, Toy Story 5. Next week here in the Filmspotting feed, you can get Filmspotting SVU. Jordan and Matt Singer will be talking about J-Lo and Brett Goldstein in Netflix's Office Romance. That's Tuesday at the Next Picture Show. We'll have their new pairing. They're not going Close Encounters, Josh, with Disclosure Day. They are going E.T. So look for that in the Next Picture Show's podcast feed. And Friday, we definitely will be talking a little Toy Story 5.
Filmspotting is produced by Golden Joe Dassault and Sam Van Halgren. Without Sam and Golden Joe, this show wouldn't go. Our production assistant is Sophie Kempenaar. Special thanks to everyone at WBEZ Chicago. More information is available at WBEZ.org. For Filmspotting, I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar. Thanks for listening.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.